This is big breaking news. President Trump has just announced that we are in a, quote, trade war with China right now. The U.S. has also announced, quote, price controls and price flooring for certain industries and certain products as well, too. The government has also just announced that they will be heavily investing in certain private industries. So this is big. We could see a major move from China in response, all right, because this is targeting China, these price controls from the US. So let's get into all the details here. You can see Trump is saying we are officially in a trade war now. Let's listen to this really quick, and then we will get into these price controls and price floors that are going into place as well too, according to the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. And there's also a lot of other news. All right, we're going to get into all of it. But you can see here, let's listen to Trump.
Mr. President, you're meeting with President Xi in a few weeks.
Yeah.
If you can't come to an agreement or a deal at that meeting, are we in for a sustained trade war with China?
Well, you're in one now. Look, we have 100% tariff. If we didn't have tariffs, we would be exposed as being a nothing. We would have no defense. You know, they've used tariffs on us, but we've never had anybody sitting in that chair that felt the need to do it.
All right, so you heard that there. Trump said we are already in the midst of a trade war right now, all right? And Secretary Scott Bessent also announced today that there could potentially be up to 500% tariffs on China if China makes any more big moves. All right, so if you need any type of like electronics or you know that all that stuff that comes from China, all right, if you need any of that stuff before the holidays for any type of project that you need, you might want to get it now before things get even worse and before these tariffs go even higher, all right? And this is the reason why this is so extreme is because Trump is course correcting the exploitation that's been happening against the United States for decades and decades, okay? The price floors are going into effect because China will dump, let's say, steel, okay? The U.S. steel industry has been destroyed. China dumps massive amounts of cheap, low-quality steel onto the markets all at once and bottoms out the price. Okay, it's worthless. And then all the steel companies in the U.S., they do this for a year straight. They go bankrupt. They go out of business. Okay, so that's what the price controls are about. We will get into that in just a second. But listen to this. This is shocking. All right, but listen to this.
85 U.S. senators are willing to give President Trump the authority to put up to 500% tariffs on China for the purchase of Russian oil. 85 U.S. senators are willing to give President Trump the authority to put up to 500% tariffs on China for the purchase of Russian oil.
All right, so you heard that there. That was today. I just wanted to play it twice because just so everyone could really hear it. He said he has up to 85 senators that will potentially authorize Trump to put 500% tariffs on China if they do not stop buying and funding Russian oil. Okay, so they're putting maximum pressure on Russia right now to try to end this war and China at the same time because they don't want China to make a move on Taiwan. Okay, they've also been making moves on the U.S. economy for decades, and that's why we've seen all of these different industries and factories and, you know, a lot of the core manufacturing has been exported to China. It used to be here in the U.S., like look at Detroit. It used to be a powerhouse car manufacturing hub and city, and now it's just a shell of itself. And all that manufacturing has been exported to places like China and even some of it to Canada even, okay? But 500% tariffs, he is saying, and they want them to stop funding Russian the Russian war machine by buying oil from them, right? Because that's Russia's main export for their economy, right? So things are getting serious. 500%. That's gonna 100% is bad, but things will most likely get back to normal. Things will just be like more expensive, certain items. And 500% though is going to massively incentivize domestic manufacturing to come back to the US. It's already been happening. There's been trillions of dollars of reinvestment back into the US, and a lot of it is due to the tariffs because companies don't want to pay the tariff, so they're just going to hire people here, right? It becomes, a cost benefit analysis for them. Whatever's cheapest, they're going to do, right? So this is a way to put pressure on businesses as well too to come back to the United States. Let's get into this too. All right, price floors are also going into effect across a range of different industries. All right, this was just announced today by Secretary Bessent. He was doing an interview with CNBC. You can see here the Trump administration will set price floors across a range of industries to combat market manipulation by China. This is what the Treasury Secretary told in an exclusive interview Wednesday. China has driven foreign competitors in their rare earth industry out of business over the past 2 decades by using its global dominance in refining and processing to slash prices. When you are facing a non-market economy like China, then you have to exercise industrial policy, he said. He said, quote, "So we're going to set price floors and the forward buying to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and we're going to do it across a range of industries." That's what he said without naming specific industries the administration was looking at beyond rare earths. I think they're going to do a lot of different industries. All right, steel's a big one. I think they're going to do a lot of mining, even if it's not rare earth, just different types of mining and minerals. And it could cause prices to potentially increase a little bit, but this is part of the reason China has been able to build such a monopoly is because nobody can compete. Okay, they're selling certain things for dirt cheap because it's all just funded by the government, first of all, and they manipulate their currency heavily with inflation and deflation cycles. And a lot of these industries are just straight up like backed by the government, so they don't really care if they lose money. And then that creates a non-profitability situation for actual businesses in other countries. Okay, and they just can't compete. If they're selling steel for dirt cheap, then steel manufacturers in the US, they just can't keep up. All right, and that's what's happened for decades with all these types of industries, manufacturing, and they're trying to reverse it. Okay, so the course correction is going to be a sharp correction, okay, to fix this because we've been way off course for decades and they're trying to turn the ship around. It says here the US also needs to set up a strategic mineral reserve. He said JP Morgan Chase is interested in working with the Trump administration to create such a reserve. Rare earths are used to produce magnets and are a crucial input in U.S. weapon systems like the F-35 warplane and Tomahawk cruise missiles. Rare earth magnets are also essential for civilian commercial applications like electronic vehicles. It has tons of military applications, radar, night vision, all these things. The Trump administration has been working to stand up a domestic rare earth supply chain. The Department of War, it's now called, they say Defense, struck a unprecedented deal in July with MP Materials, the largest U.S. rare earth miner, that included a equity stake and a price floor and offtake agreement. Okay, so that's also something else they are announcing, that they're going to heavily invest domestically in lots of businesses. So any type of raw material processing is most likely going to be invested in, and you could see these stocks go up, right? And these businesses are going to increase. So if you're into stuff like that, maybe look into that. All right, I'm not an advisor or anything like that, but this tends to happen. All these like this happened a few months ago when they invested in this business. Their stocks went way up. Okay, so look into these things. There's going to be a lot of different industries. I think they're going to and it's like, we might as well. I mean, what are we spending our trillions on at this point? It seems like it's all just wasted. So we might as well be investing it. This is critical infrastructure, right? And investing in our future that is going to bring us decades into the future as well. We need all these things for the AI revolution, whether you like it or not. It's coming. And it's going to be mixed with the military decision making. Like a lot of the warfare is going to be autonomous in the future. It already kind of is a lot of drone warfare and distance warfare. There's not a lot of close, person to person combat. And we need these processing centers, these data centers, all these things. We need all this. This is all critical infrastructure, and we need to be investing into our country. And we need these rare earth minerals, all these things to build this stuff. It says here that China last week announced sweeping new restrictions on rare earth exports ahead of an expected meeting with President Xi and President Trump in South Korea later this month. Trump has threatened to slap China with additional 100% tariffs in response, and you saw that their secretary warning there could be up to 500%. Okay, he was meeting with a Brazilian delegation, I believe that meeting was earlier, and he mentioned that. It says the U.S. could also take equity stakes in other companies in the wake of Beijing's rare earth restriction, he told CNBC. Quote, I wouldn't be surprised when asked about additional equity stakes. Quote, when we get an announcement like this week with China on rare earths, you realize we have to be self-sufficient, or we will have to be sufficient with our allies. The Trump administration will not take stakes in non-strategic industries, Bessent said. Quote, we have to be very careful not to overreach. Shares of rare earth and critical mineral miners have rallied over the past several sessions as investors speculate on which companies might be future targets for Trump administration industrial policy. So that's what I was talking about, how stocks might go up. Nobody knows what company it is. I'm not an advisor or investor or anything like that, but just something to think about. I always see this and it's like, man, wish I would have known that. All right, could have made some money there. You could also see Trump announcing this. He announced this late last night. He's also targeting certain farm products, okay, or the farming industry, targeting China as well too, because they have not been cooperating. You can see here it says, I believe that China purposely not buying our soybeans and causing difficulty in our soybean farmers is an economically hostile act. We're considering terminating business with China having to do with cooking oil and other elements of trade as retribution. As an example, we can easily produce cooking oil ourselves, and we don't need to purchase it from China. All right, so he's saying that China has not been cooperative this season with soybean farmers. That typically drops soybean prices domestically, and farmers typically just store their beans in silos more when they have a bad year like this and they're not selling as much. But that does create lower prices typically domestically, which can be good for consumers actually, but it's not great for farmers. Okay, so they're probably going to have a rough year, especially soybean farmers. And China is one of our biggest buyers for this. So Trump is saying that we are going to retaliate. We are not going to buy Chinese products. Okay, we buy a lot of pork from China and things like cooking oil as well too, he's saying. and we are going to respond by not purchasing those. Okay, so this trade war is multifaceted. It's covering multiple industries. It's covering even food now. Okay, and this is important. I saw some people kind of like laughing in the comments that it's like, oh, now we're going after cooking oil, but it's important to China. Trust me, it's significant. That's why they haven't bought our soybeans, because they know it's important to us, and it's important to them. Okay, it's one of their industries, and they wouldn't be making these moves if it wasn't important. All right, so the U.S. needs to retaliate. The U.S. needs to make. We can't just sit here and allow China to chop our economy up, and that's what they've been doing essentially for decades. And China actually holds a major stake in a lot of these, quote, mega farms and these big industrial farms. They own a big stake in a lot of them. Okay, they own a lot of farmland. They own a lot of the processors as well too. A lot of the beef processors and meat processing facilities. China even owns those. Okay, so that's a national security threat too. They could potentially shut these things down. They could just bankrupt themselves, these companies that they've bought out, and just bankrupt themselves, bankrupt these companies, so we don't have any processors, and they don't really care, okay? Because that was probably the plan all along, is to take over these companies and eventually gut them from the inside out and destroy part of this industry. Okay, so this is getting pretty serious between the US and China, and I think the writing on the wall is there for Taiwan as well too. I don't think China would be making these strong moves. I think they want to go into trade negotiations with a powerful stance, but they could have easily just put tariffs on or something along those lines, like put a 50% tariff on. Something like that, raise tariffs a little. This mineral export control is very serious and is a national security threat. Okay, tariffs are one thing because, things can be compensated for. Prices might go up a little bit on certain items, but the trade is still flowing. Trade is still moving. When these export bans and controls are put in place, trade literally stops. China says that only X amount of this mineral can be processed or can leave China and go to the United States. Okay, so it's literally a wall on trade for things that we desperately need. So it's a big step, and hopefully this is posturing for trade negotiations. Hopefully we can have that. They both want to just be in a strong position, but it also does not look good for Taiwan, and we keep getting these warnings from top officials too, warning that there could be a move on Taiwan, potentially in coordination, Russia and China. Okay, potentially Russia making moves somewhere in Europe and China making moves on Taiwan at the same time to split the NATO alliance and to split U.S. forces between two different battlefronts. Okay, going to be a lot harder to deal with these two at the same time in two different places. So make sure you guys are stocked up. Make sure you're prepared. Make sure you're getting ready. This food one too is a warning sign too, to just get into homesteading if you can, or at least have some preps set back to buffer yourself potentially from any inflation. All right, maybe have your pantry stocked up, and some places like the South, Florida, places like that, you can grow all winter. All right, so maybe use this as a warning, as a wake-up call to get more into that. All right, I've been growing food and chickens and all that stuff for a decade now, and it's something I want to get into even harder. All right, so thank you guys. Hope you guys are staying safe, staying prepared, staying stocked up. And if you need anything, like electronics, anything like that for Christmas, get it now. All right, before prices, they might slap a 500% tariff at whatever you want to get for your, for your wife or for your husband or for your grandson or your kids. It might be a lot more expensive by the time Christmas gets here if you wait. So just something to think about. Hope you guys are staying safe. Hope you're staying prepared, staying stocked up. I hope you have big blessings for your life and your family. And I hope you have a big old blessed day.